Hi, my name is Jade. I'm predominantly a lurker over here on Booktube. I mostly post over on Booktok, TikTok, but I've been getting a lot of requests from people, and this is something I've been wanting to do myself too, which is to compile, certain videos to become one and post them here because especially for the last year, I've been doing an in-depth literary analysis / dissection of certain popular series. And there's certain ones that are starting to get buried in my feed because sadly I don't have quite enough followers to get the playlist setting. And I just want to put them all in one place. So that being said, these videos are coming directly from my TikTok. I'm not refilming anything. So I'm still going to keep the title cards, which I think should be useful because it's going to tell you exactly what chapters I'm talking about. And I'm very excited for more people to maybe discover them, or I've had a few people saying that they've seen my other videos and they just want it all in one place to rewatch or listen because they found it helpful for some reason. But just to let you know, if you have not seen my videos, the way that I do my literary analysis is that I am actively reading the book, and as I actively read them, I am just picking apart literally whatever detail just comes up in that chapter or sentence and look at the layers behind the sentences, because Holly Black's really good at presenting something one way, but there being so many layers beneath it. I talk about the characters and their psyche and their development. I talk about things such as nature versus nurture. And as I do so, I also, just as to let you know, I talk about the entirety of the trilogy, so there would be spoilers for the entirety of it. But I also bring up details from the spin-off The Stolen Heir and also the other book, Darkest Part of the Forest, because it's in the same world. But with those two books, I don't spoil the plot of those books. I just bring up random details that are useful for whatever I'm talking about in the moment. So I hope you continue to watch the rest of this video, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you want to leave a comment, let me know what other books you'd like me to maybe do along the same lines, do a literary, analysis dissection. I would love recommendations. I have a couple more I'm hoping to get through. And as I'm actively posting this video, I'm also currently working on The Stolen Heir. So check out the rest of this video. I'm back after a brief break to continue my literary analysis of The Court Prince, but I have moved on to the second book, which is The Wicked King. And this is personally my favorite in the series. I at least think that there's a lot more Carden and Jude scenes, and their scenes are chef's kiss. They are amazing. A lot of the scenes that live right in my mind come from this book specifically. I love it. But besides those two, which I could, talk about for hours, I love that we're really getting into the court politics because now Jude and Carden are officially players on the board. They are officially active participants in this Game of Thrones that is going on, and they're competing against older, more powerful players, and it's just so interesting to watch it develop. But alongside we're watching the relationship develop, because in the last book they were definitely enemies, but they hadn't quite reached a point of lovers. In this one they were reluctant allies, and it's just watching them slowly fall into lovers. However, the thing that's really holding them back is Jude and the lies that she believes in, and I love this book. I can't wait to dig into it. Also, I'm using my LitJoy copy, which will have annotations from Holly Black, but these end papers are just gorgeous. Jude talks about how practicing her swordplay feels a lot like learning how to ride a bike. I mean, that was something she was doing prior to being taken. And she says that, she had a lot of cuts and scrapes and she was hurt a lot similarly, but that was her own, choosing, because she had a disdain against using training wheels and wanted to ride in the street and go fast like Vivi, whereas Taryn kept to the safety of the sidewalk. And I think that perfectly illustrates the twins' personalities. Jude is willing to jump headfirst into the world of fairy, even if it means that she might drown and get hurt and all that, whereas Taryn is trying to earn her way into fairy using a safer method, or at least as safe as she thinks, which is to marry into it. Yeah, we get to bring back my nature versus nurture argument in this book, and immediately on page 2, because she's talking about how Maddox would laugh when she would swing her hardest at him because he liked her anger. Fire, he called it. And she says she liked it when she was angry too. Angry was better than scared, better than remembering she was immortal among monsters. No one was offering her the option of training wheels anymore. And I think, she might, within her nature, be a little bit more hot-tempered and prone to anger. However, Maddox nurtured that, encouraged that, and we see that she leans into that so much throughout the last book and this book too. When Maddox says power is the ability to get what you want. Power is the ability to be the one making the decisions. And how do we get power? We learn how to fight well? No, we get power by taking it. And that basically sets up not only everything that was happening towards the end of the last book, but also this one, of Jude realizing that she needs to not wait for someone to hand her power, but take it. But simultaneously, it's this lie that she's holding on, that she needs power in order to have like, you know, control over her life, to be able to make the decisions that she wants to make. I think we're watching a moment that is going to taint the rest of Jude's life, because when they were younger, Maddox had them defend a hill and to fight it back against him. And while they're collecting rocks, Terrence says, "You don't think he'll get mad, do you? Because the last time he got mad, he unalived their mother, and he supposedly loved their mother. So to them, they're thinking, he might claim to love us, but how far does that love go? How do we know he's not going to turn around and accidentally unalive us too?" And I think that taints Jude's every relationship, that, you know, someone might love her, but she's always fearful of them turning around and hurting her back, of unaliving her. So she's always on the defense, and that especially affects her relationship with Carden, in my opinion. Excuse me as I fan myself with this opening paragraph for chapter 1, because it's the new High King of Fairy lounges on his throne, his crown resting at an inscantia angle, his long villainously scarlet cloak pinned at his shoulders and sweeping the floor. An earring shines from the peak of one pointed ear. Heavy rings glitter along his knuckles. His most ostentatious decoration, however, is his soft, sullen mouth. And I just love this description of Carden, but I love that Jude's trying to paint him as looking like a villain, like literally saying villainously scarlet cloak, but also that he's not taking his power seriously, that he's lounging on his throne. And these are, like, you know, 2 points that annoy her, but like in addition, there's other things, like she's annoyed that he's wearing an earring on his pointed ear, as if to mock her, to point out like, hey, look, I am a fae. And then the thing that annoys her the most, though, is his soft, sullen mouth. Like, how could you be sullen when you're in the seat of power? But also, she's fixating on his mouth, and as she said in the last book, that once you kiss once, apparently there's a possibility of kissing again. Like, she can't not think about it. But I also really love that he's wearing earrings and jewelry, because that's more commonly associated with feminine style. But I love that I recently saw a TikTok video where someone's talking about how love interests in teen movies previously used to be more jock-like, whereas today we're starting to see ones that are emulating more like Harry Styles and Timothée Chalamet, wearing earrings and rings and other jewelry, taking on a more feminine style, and Carden does that too. I love that Jude is describing Carden as her puppet king, because that's exactly what he is. But the thing is that they don't realize just yet what she is doing, because right now they don't hate it. Like, he doesn't love it because he's being kind of hindered, but he doesn't hate it because he doesn't have to take responsibility. However, when Jude gets taken by the Undersea, it's her strings that she's attached to him that's prohibiting him from using his full power to save her. And that's the turning point for him, to like be like, I need this power. I need to be in full control. I can't depend on you to do it for me. So I really love this line where Jude says, "Then a year and a day seems like forever," because it's a reminder of her age, because I believe she's only 18. She's only 18 years to compare against. And when you're 18, you think a year and a day seems like forever, because, you know, you've only had 18 of them to go through. And so you are in this hurry to figure out the rest of your life because you don't have much to compare against. Time is wibbly wobbly. But as you get older, you have more years to compare against. And then at that point, you realize a year and a day is a blink of an eye. And also, I had so much time to figure out what I want, and you're no longer in a hurry. The interesting thing with June, I think it has to do with her upbringing, is that she needs total control of her life because she had no control over her life. And so when a year and a day is going by way too fast, she's realizing that it's not enough time. She needs more time to control Carden. And so she's trying to figure out how to trick him into prolonging this, because she's thinking in terms of Faye. But the thing is that Carden continuously points out to her in this book and in the last one, is that if you only trust him, if you give him a little bit of like control over his own life, he will most likely do whatever she wanted. The thing that I love most about Carden and Jude is how similar they are, and they don't even realize. And the thing that they're most similar about is getting under people's skin, of egging them on, because Jude literally says in the last book of, "I'm not playing the game of kings and queens, I'm more pissing off people and eating the consequences." And she does that throughout that book and throughout this book and the next one. And Carden does the exact same thing. He does it more so to Balkan, and now he's doing it to her, because he's literally annoying her. She's like so pissed off that he's acting like a layabout, not taking his job seriously. But the thing is, Carden's annoyed at her for not trusting him, and so the way he's taking it out on her, instead of communicating, is by living up to this expectation, this idea of him that she has. And he's like, "Fine, if you think I'm a layabout, I will be a layabout." Once again, we're seeing Carden be drunk. Now, it could be just him holding up this image of how everyone expects him to look, to be the drunk layabout. But however, he does have his cup continuously refilled, so you can assume that he's actually drinking it, which then leads to, why is he doing that? And I think it's to dull his pain, his heartache, that, you know, not only has he lost his family, he's in a seat of power that he had no desire of wanting, thanks to a person that he was starting to trust, and had that trust shattered because she used him. So he's drinking the pain away. I love it. I love because like during a moment of pause, he looks at Jude and he raises an eyebrow and says, enjoying yourself? And you're sitting here thinking like Jude could probably ask him the same thing. Like, are you enjoying yourself? Because he's sitting, lounging, having his hand kissed, you know, people bowing and scraping, constant refills of wine. So it looks like he's enjoying himself, but he really isn't. But he's looking at Jude standing right next to the seat of power, exactly what she wants. Having others acknowledge her, a human, being that close to power. Is she enjoying herself? No, actually, she's not either. This is my favorite part about Cardan, and Jude acknowledges that he is a master wordsmith. That she says, his gift is to take a compliment and turn it into an insult, a jab that hurts more for the temptation to take it at face value. And she continues to hold on to this belief, by the way, throughout the rest of the series, because sometimes he is saying things at face value. He is being truly honest, but she thinks that he is insulting her. And that's where they have this miscommunication then. Wait, I love this imagery of Jude describing how she's up in the dais, looking down at like all the others circle dances and play their songs and drink their golden wine and compose their riddles and their curses while I look down on them from the royal dais. She's still looking down at them. Only now she's at a place of power. She's on the royal dais instead of up in this like balcony alcove where she used to hide with Taryn. But she's still looking down. She's still not a part of it. She's still not a part of the fairy, no matter how much she tries to tell herself that she is. Oh, Cardan, you walked into that trap because you're trying to prove a point to Jude. When Grimston says, I can't do another vow, like I loathe to do that again, how about instead I prove myself through my deeds? And Cardan agrees, even though Jude is starting to smell some deceit, some potential danger into that, which Jude's correct in thinking that. But Cardan's thinking, look, I'm proving that I trust him to hold his word, to be faithful to us, to my court. And I want you to trust me in that same way, to not hold me by a vow to prove it. One, I just really love this interaction with Mother Mara saying, and you will let this mortal girl answer for you? And Cardan says, I suppose I shall. It amuses her to keep me out of trouble. Like, ugh. But I also like that Mother Mara is offended because Jude saw through her deceit. A mortal girl is able to pick through her language and note that she was deceiving them, that she knows the fairy ways enough to use it against them, that isn't gonna fall for it and it's offensive because she's mortal. And so she reluctantly praises she's clever enough. Like, how dare she? Which then goes into the lower expectations, that because she is human, because she is mortal, their expectations of her is automatically lowered, and so the fairies end up being burned by that. I really enjoy that Cardan then leans forward and goes, oh, tell me the rest. I like tricks and snares, even once I was merely caught in, because he's trying to learn, he's trying to get better and figure out how to be, you know, deceitful, how to work the ways that Jude is working, because we later see that he tries to use it himself and it ends up backfiring, but he's trying to get better at it. I kind of love that Jude has to declare who she is to other fairy, that she is Jude Durante, the seneschal to the High King, that either they don't know who she is or what she would look like, or that she feels this need to immediately establish her place of power, that even though she is pretty much right beside the throne, giving advice to the High King, that others may not know who she is or respect her, which is in truth, we do see that they still don't respect her. The interesting thing about fairy that we have previously seen is this continuous game of push and pull at power, of seeing how much you can prod till you topple someone and you can take their spot. We saw that in the last book of like Locke pushing his luck with Cardan sometimes. But the interesting thing now is how Cardan and Jude are treated, because they both rose to power at the exact same time. They're the exact same age. However, the difference is not only their gender, but also their species. Cardan is not many. Some people do question his place of power, but not as many as those questioning Jude's. And we see that immediately in the tower, forgetting the amount of, like, the way that the others treat her, the way that they ignore her or grumble as they have to admit to her commands. And the fact that because of that, she is a little bit more heavy-handed with her commands because she has to prove herself. I love this physical manifestation of Balkan's sin, that when he unalived his father's blood turned into red moths, and to this day they are still following and haunting him, even in his cell. But yet, even though they are his telltale heart, it does not change Balkan's ways. He just leans harder into it. He willingly makes a deal with the Undersea to overthrow his brother. He later attempts to poison his brother. And I think the interesting thing with Balkan is that it is proving how, like, stubborn he is, how steadfast he is towards his goal. And we see a hint of that in Jude. So I think it's tempting us to wonder, how far is Jude willing to go? Because she says she'll go however far. So Balkan is, I guess, another manifestation of what her potential future could be. While I do love Balkan's line of, I heard some mortals mistake fear for love, it simultaneously is a little offensive because it is him diminishing Jude's intelligence. It is him, I don't think he fully believes that she is smart enough to scheme and execute a successful coup. But even if he begrudgingly kind of will admit that she might be, he diminishes her intelligence still by saying that she's mostly using it to prop up Carden because she's in love with him when she should really be afraid of him, that she's mistaking her fear of him for love of him. I love the Rich telling Jude off here when he says, that ought to include being shrewd. Relying only on yourself is a good way to get got. Next time, take a member of the Royal Guard. Take one of us. Take a cloud of sprites or a drunken spriggan. Just take someone. Because in part it is foreshadowing to events that will happen later in this book, but also it's referencing Jude's journey that she needs to go on, because at this point she still thinks that she can only depend on herself, that all the schemes and everything that happens she needs to do herself, that she doesn't depend on anyone else, and pretty much needs to start opening up and trusting others, which is also what Carden really wants her to do, is trust him. When Jude talks about how it was the first food that she had all day, that my belly is making hungry noises, another reminder of the way that my body is unlike theirs. Fairy stomachs don't gurgle. Now, she could hide the fact a little bit better if she's being more preemptive, like actually feeding and going to sleep, not pushing her body to its limits, trying to keep up with the Fae, even though no one is, encouraging or acknowledging the fact that she needs to keep up. It's all, on herself, that she's doing to herself. But yet simultaneously, even though it seems like trying to pretend like she is one of the Fae, her body will always betray her. Like, for instance, in the last book, we learned that she gets a monthly period, unlike the Fae. So every month she gets a reminder that she is human. That no matter how hard she pushes her body, it will always still be human. It will not be like the Fae. When Jude talks about how the other members of the Court of Shadows and its recruits are watching her as she interacts with her captive, she says, I am not used to an audience, which is interesting because she's been performing ever since her coup. Every time she gets up on the dais and stands next to Carden as his seneschal, she puts on this role, because she definitely acts differently. She's a little bit more reserved when she's up on the dais. And every time she interacts with anyone in this world nowadays, she is putting on a mask, pretending to be braver than she is, pretending like she knows more than she actually does. So in actuality, she's been performing in front of an audience for quite a while now. I love when Jude talks about how one time Carden told the rest of the Court of Shadows, I'm playing the High King in her little pageant. Now, one is him using his words to needle at her and annoy her because he's a little annoyed with the situation too. But he's technically telling the truth, that he is aware that they are putting on a show and she's the puppeteer, that he knows that he has to look like he is the High King without doing any of the actions or decisions of the High King, even though it annoys her that he's not doing it. But he knows that if he actually did, she'd be even more annoyed and feel threatened, like he's actually going to take the throne out from underneath her. So he's trying to show and tell her, you can trust me. I know we're putting on a show. I know my role in this show. And it's her misconstruing and thinking that she's, he's just picking on her, but that's not the case. He's trying to be just trust me. I know what we're doing. Trust me. I love the ghost subtly pointing out the slight flaw to Jude's plan with Oak, that yes, you're raising Oak outside the viciousness of Fairy, but yet how can he rule a place that he knows very little about, the ways of it? Just like how we could not go into the human world and be able to interact as well after not growing up in it. Normally I'm a Taryn apologist. However, in this moment I would be kind of annoyed because I think Taryn does need to apologize, because she is partially at fault. Even though I know this is her only way of earning her place in Fairy, that she needed to marry him. If she told Jude, I have to marry him because I don't have an exceptional skill and I don't know if I'll have any other offers of marriage down the line, this might be my only option, and Locke is good enough, I like him enough, and I'm sorry that we had to use you for me to be tested. It was my way of earning my way into the world of Fairy, which is equally what Jude's trying to do. And while Jude may not support Locke and may hope for something better for her sister, she would still support her and accept her apology, and that's how they would move past it. But yet Taryn's not apologizing it. She's trying to push it under the rug and blame everything else, saying, are we going to fight forever? As if Jude is the thing holding them back. And then pointing out Maddox promises he won't argue with you. While yes, it has been avoiding the house in part because of Maddox, but also she is extremely busy now. But Taryn's been coming to court and ignoring her. She hasn't gone up to her when she's up on the dais. She hasn't apologized, so Taryn is equally at fault. So I kind of love that Jude's relationship with Taryn is interesting because even though she never got an apology, she is willing to push it under the rug, even though Locke and her manipulated her and used her because she loves Jude. Even though she broke Jude's trust, she's willing to give her a second chance, which is interesting because that's exactly what Cardan is doing with Jude. Even though Jude broke his trust by the end of the first book, and yes, the two of them kind of show that they're still a little bitter about it, like Cardan with Jude and Jude with Taryn, but Cardan equally is willing to give Jude a second chance. Okay, I kind of hate Taryn a little bit alongside Jude for bringing the stuffed animals to the palace, like her old ones. And in part, it's kind of a manipulation. Like, she is kind of working for Maddox already. You can start to see the signs because with this, it's a reminder to Jude that you are still just a child, that you should turn to Maddox for help. And we see later in the book how Taryn does say stuff like that, does do things being like, no, you should really still trust Maddox. You should turn to him. Meanwhile, Jude's trying to step into adulthood to make her own decisions. Once again, we're seeing that Taryn is a little bit more fairy-like than Jude. That in the previous book, we saw that she is a little bit more self-focused, unlike Jude, who's a little bit more noble. And here we're seeing once again that instead of offering apology, she's offering her gifts, a boon, offering to bring her stuff to help her out because she sees that she's unspooling. It also is very telling that when Taryn goes to leave, she kisses Jude on her bruised cheek. Not her good cheek, but on her bruised one. And I think it's symbolism to show that she is going to act like she still loves her, but is going to do things that will hurt her. It's interesting that after Jude does her routine self-poisoning kind of thing, she thinks of what Balkan says, which is that I've heard that mortals mistake, fear for love. And I think it's to kind of show that Jude needs to gradually realize her love. That she doesn't just wake up and go, oh my god, I'm in love with Cardan. It's kind of this gradual poisoning that she gradually learns, I'm in love with him. For a while now, I've been doing an in-depth literary analysis of the Cruel Prince series as I've been rereading it, and I'm currently working on the second book, which is Wicked King, but I just want to quickly pause and talk about one of the reasons why I love the subplot, which is Cardan and Jude's relationship. And the one aspect that I love about it is how hard Cardan is working to gain Jude's love. And it has nothing to do with attraction, because from the very beginning of the first book, we know that Jude is attracted to him. She literally says he's attractive. If only he wasn't so cruel, she might have been in love with him. She says something along those lines. The thing that is holding their relationship back is the fact that she does not trust him. And the sad irony of the situation is that Cardan has more of the reason not to trust Jude. Because by the end of the first book, he is so giddy that they're scheming together. And then she breaks his trust using him for her coup and puts him on the throne, the very throne that he specifically told her, I want nothing to do with it. I would ideally love to be as far away from that. And she used him for that. She broke his trust. And not only that, but made him take a vow to pretty much obey her. Which, yes, he willingly agrees because he trusts her and kind of ignores it. But every time, and that's a stab to the heart like that. And every time she commands him, it's the twisting of the knife. Because it's continuously proving that she does not trust him. Because there are so many moments where she asks him to do something and he willingly does it. He does not need to be commanded. He would willingly do it. And he's continuously trying to tell her and prove it to her. And she ignores it. And I think it's because he is working so hard to prove that he is trustworthy to Jude, because he knows the moment that she deems him trustworthy, they can have a relationship, because he knows that she's attracted to him. The thing that's holding them back is the trustworthiness. And so he's going above and beyond, and that causes him to end up in these big messes. For instance, in the beginning of the second book, when Grimwald, the metalworker, whatever his name is, reappears in his court, he refuses to take a vow and oath because he'd been him in the ass previously, and he'd much rather prove his loyalty through his deeds. And Cardan readily agrees to it, and it kind of looks at Jude and subtweets at her, being like, look, I didn't make him take a vow and oath because I trust him to prove his loyalty. And we see it once again bite him in the ass towards the end of the second book, because when Taryn comes pretending to be Jude, first off, Cardan doesn't recognize her because he was just poisoned by his own brother. Normally he would recognize the twins because he loves Jude that much. But he doesn't recognize her and thinks it's Jude and readily agrees to whatever Taryn asks of him. And when Jude goes, why would you do that? He says, I thought it was you and I trust you. I trusted you. And it's because he is trying so hard to prove himself as trustworthy that it bites him in the ass. It bites both of them in the ass. And the thing is, it's Jude's fault. She believes so strongly in this lie that he is untrustworthy that it blinds her to the truth. He does everything in his power to prove it wrong, and she continuously ignores it for so long. And I hate it. It's so great. That's what makes a relationship so interesting, is this interesting, trustworthy dynamic. When Jude walked into Carden's room, she describes it as seeing Carden resting among the wreckage of his furniture, curtains ripped from the rods, the frames of paintings cracked, the canvases kicked through, furniture broken, a small fire smolders in the corner, and everything stinks of smoke and spilled wine. And it made me think of something that Sia said in the first book. I guarantee you I'm still pronouncing her name wrong, but I don't care anymore. She said, that's what he does. He ruins things. And initially Jude thinks she's talking about Carden, but she's actually talking about Locke. And once again, Locke is with Carden. Locke is the source of this destruction, possibly. Oh my god, I love this. So, she's painting the room, notices Carden's not alone. On a nearby couch is Locke and two beautiful fairies, a boy and a girl, one with ram's horns. And that part's interesting because Jude is kind of known, even in this world, that she has her hair normally done in horns and ram's horns. And it's interesting to me because in the first book, when she was at Locke's party, again with Locke, she saw Carden making out with two people, one with horns. So in that case, you can assume that Carden kind of pulled that girl because, he had feelings with Jude. But here you can assume Locke probably pulled this girl, being like, oh, maybe he just has a thing for horns, or he knows that he has a thing for Jude. This is so interesting to me because, Jude describes how the guards even seem intimidated by, Carden in the scene within the room. And one is interesting because even before Jude had this power over Carden, this vow, she definitely would have still stormed in the room and been like, what the F is your problem? But the fact that they're, hanging on the edges, and she describes the guards as ready to protect the High King from any threat that isn't himself. They're enabling him. That Jude is the only thing curbing, his worst desires. If it wasn't for her, he would become a terrible, cruel king, a wicked king. He wouldn't have probably been in this situation in the first place if it wasn't for Jude, but it's a good thing that Jude's there because she's the one thing kind of curbing that worst parts of himself that others are allowing or pushing him towards, such as Locke. And to continue off that last point, this is one of the other reasons why I love Jude and Carden's relationship. If it wasn't for Jude, Carden would have been just doing what he was doing before, living up to this low expectation Balkan has, which is a drunk layabout. Yeah, he would have just been drunk and going to parties. He would have not done anything in his life because he doesn't exactly have the motivation, thanks to being, pushed down so often, to excel at life, to do anything with his life. Jude is the one giving him direction, giving him a purpose in his life. But simultaneously, Carden is pushing her to open up, to trust others, to, think differently than how Maddox had taught her to think. And Jude is also prejudiced. It's not just Carden. Actually, Carden's prejudice against humans and others isn't that toxic as others in his world. It's just more that's what he was told. He just assumed that's it, but he's more willing to learn that he's wrong when it comes to expectations of others, species in general. Whereas Jude just automatically assumes the worst from everyone. She assumes pretty much everyone in Fairy believes, thinks, and acts the same. While Carden trusts Jude, he's still part of this world. And this world is a hierarchy, it's a ladder, and it's this continuation of pushing and pulling at the power, at prodding others till they topple so you can take their spot. I mentioned this in a previous video. And Carden is going to obviously do it too. And we see it here when he says, have a drink. And Jude says, I have no head for liquor, my lord. And he says, am I not your king? Trying to rebalance who has power. Jude might have control over him, but when he's in an audience, she has to obey him. He has power in the situation. And he may not do this with militia or ill intent. It's just, they literally breathe and do this. It's so instinctual part of this world. Everyone's doing this. So Carden says to Jude, they told me a story. Would you like to hear it? Once upon a time, there was a human girl stolen away by fairies. And because of that, she swore to destroy them. And Jude responds with, wow, that really is a testament to how much you suck as a king to believe your reign is capable of destroying fairy. Now, what she says is interesting because of the prophecy we learned later. This prophecy that was given when Carden was born, that he will destroy pretty much fairy. But also what he said to Jude isn't entirely wrong. She's just lying to herself and saying that she's trying to make this world better. But, and she is. But a part of her also just wants to make them bleed, to feel the same pain that she felt. She's slightly vindictive like that. And I think in part it developed under Maddox, that, you made me bleed, I'll make you bleed. Cardan curating this persona of a crow prince has some benefits, for instance, he's gained the respect of a lot of his kingdom because of how the system is set up, where like you're higher on the hierarchy if you have power and your ruthlessness, and he's proven that he's pretty ruthless in this act that he's put on over the years. But now it's biting him in the ass, because when he was shot at, no one believes him. They thought he shot at the girl in the bed because she was actually hit, and it's a safe assumption because of over the years of how he acted, how he curated his persona. Literally in the first book, we watch him rip the wings off a fairy boy in the middle of court. It's a safe assumption, however, it is leaving him vulnerable. I love how perfectly Jude describes Cardan here, because she says the disturbing thing about Cardan is how well he plays the fool to disguise his own cleverness. I have a theory that just hit me, because every other time I read this book, I didn't think too hard about Nausicaa's actions. Like, I just assumed what she says, that it was done out of jealousy, because she was planning on going up to surprise him in his room. But what if Locke set her up? Because the timing seems a little too interesting, that Locke was there. When he left the room, he looked at Jude and gave her like a private look that was like as if they were sharing a secret, and she's like, what the hell? I could so see Locke telling Nausicaa, you should totally go up in his room and surprise him. Like, I think he misses you. Because what if he knew about the secret tunnel? Because his mother was a mistress of the High King, and like the rooms are connected that way. And so I could so see Locke setting her up, because we know he loves stories. And what better story is than to have the ex-lover of the king shoot at the king, especially if the ex-lover is a daughter of one of the other kingdoms. And I just pause to think about this because of her sitting alone in the dark moping, and it just reminded me so much of the first book when Jude came down after Locke's party, saw her moping at Locke's table, and that's when she told her he ruins things. And we don't know if she was talking about Cardan or Locke, or if she was sitting there moping about Cardan or Locke. And yeah, it's interesting to think about. Nausicaa bringing up Valerian right now is interesting, because she says, well, you murdered Valerian, did you not? I saw him the night he disappeared, and he was talking about you, talking about paying you back for stabbing him. And I think he's supposed to be also similar to what Balkan is for Jude, because Balkan's supposed to show the negative side of going however far to get what you want, which Jude literally says in the first book, I will go however far. And Balkan's doing the same. He literally unalived his entire family for the throne. It is not enough, but we're now looking at where he's at right now. We know later in the book he ends up unalived thanks to Jude, because he was pushing it. But Valerian is the example of vengeance, of pushing vengeance too far, because he ended up unalived. So Jude needs to kind of bring back her, goal, like overwhelming goals, know when to stop for that, but also when to stop with vengeance. Oh my god, I also love the immediate mirroring, because she's literally judging Nausicaa when Nausicaa says, I won't get punished. Literally, we have a pact between the undersea and the land. I am a princess, like, I won't get punished, blah blah blah, it doesn't matter. And she was judging her for that, but then immediately after, when Nausicaa calls her out for unaliving Valerian, Jude thinks, and so what if I did anyway? I am the right hand of the High King of Fairy. He can pardon my every crime. Literally doing the exact same thing as Nausicaa, not even a page later. I love Cardan telling his guards, like, worry not, I am sure she's got plans of some kind when Jude leads him away, because it's showing perfectly his relationship not only with Jude, but with everyone in general, because instinctually he's a follower, he's not a leader. And like, he literally says that in the first book when Jude talks about the little friend group. He goes, I'm not really the leader, they just, use me kind of to do what they wish. And he's a figurehead, and I think after a halfway point when his family was unalived, he realized the repercussions of being the figurehead of the leader. You're kind of on the front lines, but it's something he's done it for so long, he falls back on it. So that's why he willingly allows Jude to make plans. But it was when Jude is taken by the undersea, he finally has to make plans himself. He has to scheme himself, and he's not bad at it. He has room to grow. I kind of love the way that Cardan gives compliments, because it's not like Locke's where it's flowery and fake. His is saying, like, I truly see you. Lily, Jude says, I have said that he has the power to deliver a compliment and make it hurt. So too can he say something that ought to be insulting and deliver it in such a way that feels like being truly seen. Again, being a master wordsmith that he is. But I love that, when he says, for a moment I thought you might have been the one that shot the bolt at me. And she says, what made you think otherwise? He says, they missed. Like, complimenting her skill. Like, I know you're very skilled, but also saying, like, I know that if you really were going to shoot at me, you would have definitely hit me. I don't really have anything to say about this. I just really love this line that, like, it's one of my favorites throughout the entire trilogy, and it's when Cardan says, "Kiss me again. Kiss me until I am sick of it." And then immediately follows up with, "If you're the sickness, I suppose you can't also be the cure." Which, actually, now that I think about it, with the whole sickness thing is kind of similar to Jude slowly poisoning herself. I said this in another video, that she doesn't just fall in love with Cardan. It's a slow, steady falling in love with Cardan. And same with her slowly poisoning herself to be acclimated to it. She has to acclimate to falling in love with Cardan. So Jude's thinking about what Nasia just said about her mother wanting her to become queen, and she's, watching Cardan sleep in her bed as she's guarding over him after the whole, being shot at incident. And she says, "He is as ridiculously beautiful as ever. Mouth soft, lips slightly parted, lashes so long that when his eyes are closed, they rest against his cheek." But the first thing that she points out is his mouth. Once again, literally the opening chapter of this book, like chapter 1, starts with her describing his soul and mouth. It's what she said in the first book, that once you kiss someone, the possibility of kissing again hovers over you. She's always thinking about it, even if she won't admit it to herself. Oh my god, I love this moment that Jude describes. She says, "I recall walking with him in the gardens of the palace at dusk. Cardan's hands were clasped behind his back, and he stopped to sniff an enormous globe of a white rose tipped with scarlet, just before it snapped at the air. He grinned and lifted an eyebrow at me, but I was too nervous to smile back." It's him, being like, "Hey, it's just like you." Beautiful on the outside, and I am absolutely enamored with it, but I gotta be careful because it has teeth. Jude's thinking about a time that she gave Cardan a command where she says, "You're never to deny me an audience or give an order to keep me from your side." And he responds with, "Whysoever would I want you to leave my side?" Now, his line is underlined with an annotation by Holly Block that says, "Though they can't lie, they can say pretty much anything in the form of a question," basically saying that he is kind of lying. But I think it's similar to what he was feeling in the first book, when he said that, "I can't stop thinking about you and I hate it. It disgusts me." He is emotionally conflicted. He doesn't know how to feel, because he knows in his head that he should not have feelings for Jude, that he should not associate with her, but yet at the same time it pains him to think of her not being by his side. But yet he knows if he continues to interact with her, continues to think about her, continues to have her by his side, it's going to be harder to not continuously fall in love with her. Jude then continues her list of commands to him, and he made a gesture in the air as though all of this was ridiculously obvious, as though somehow giving him the commands out loud was an act of bad faith, which it is, to Cardan at least. He trusts Jude, and he would pretty much do anything she tells him to do, and yet she's proving yet again that she doesn't trust him to do this, to help her. The only way for him to help her is if she commands him, and it offends him, because he's like, "I will do whatever you want, pretty much, just ask me." Jude then ends by saying, "And no matter how much you hate being High King, you must pretend otherwise." He says, "I don't." "What do you mean?" "I don't hate being High King. Not always. I thought I would, and yet I do not. Make of that what you will." Now, the romantic in me sees it as him thinking it sucks, the power, having a target at my back and all that, but it also means that I get to interact with Jude. He can't think of any other moment that would have brought them this close together if it wasn't for the fact that he is the High King and she is his seneschal. So Jude and the Roach are talking about this secret passage between the High King's room and the one that Cardan's currently using, how the shooter was able to get through. And they're saying that it's it was for lovers, the High King's lovers who weren't consorts. It was a constant turnaround of people. And Roach says, that's interesting. That's the room that he chooses. And I think it's supposed to symbolize that he doesn't think himself of staying in power. He knows that that's what Jude wants, that he's not there for long. He is to be turned over fast like these lovers. Okay, for me, I'm thinking this in terms of gender expectations, but also the Minister of Key's comment felt like a boomer comment in a workplace when he says, "Shu Durante, where is the High King?" As if she is his babysitter, his secretary, because she is a young woman. She should be keeping track of where he is at all times, not like she doesn't have a million other things to be doing as seneschal. So I think the reason why Cardan doesn't come to these council meetings, besides it being boring, because we do know later when he actually does go, he gets bored and annoyed by it. But I think the main reason is that he knows that this group are already looking at him and Jude with a critical eye and are more likely than anyone else to sniff out their scheme, what is going on between them, that Jude is using him as a puppet king, that he is a temporary king. And, that it's just better if he's not in the room for them to sniff it out. But on top of that, he's a temporary king, so why should he actually reign? Because technically he could go to these meetings and pretend like he's making decisions, but really let them make the decisions. But the other reason why he doesn't come, I think, is because he knows if he's in that room, Jude is going to get defensive. She's going to be like more worried that he actually wants to keep the power when he really doesn't. And so he stays away in part to avoid like the rest of the council being suspicious, but also to not have Jude be defensive of him and to like trust that he is on her side. So the royal astronomer is telling subtly to Jude, like, you've noticed that, you know, the High King is very powerful, that like things have been changing with someone so young and vital, that like when his blood falls, things grow. And she's sitting there being like, well, shit, is he really that powerful? And I have total command of someone that powerful. In, you know, conjunction, I'm powerful now. So I think part of the reason why Cardan offers marriage to Jude to get out of the vow arrangement that they have, besides wanting to marry Jude, is that he knows that he has to offer her something of equal value. Why would she give up this much power willingly? So that's why, you know, if she is made queen, she will also be linked to the land, as we see in the next book. I love that Maddox was just like zoning out as the rest of them are like pretty much lecturing Jude until Jude mentions, yeah, we should watch out for the undersea. She's planning something. He goes, wait, what? There's a potential war on the horizon? Hell yes. One, Maddox stupidly is still treating Jude like a child, like, oh, when you're school friends, like, but, and she's thinking like, he's lucky he still has his position because it was in my right to get rid of him. But she figures he's a weapon better deployed by us than against us. But the thing is that she hasn't realized, which is understandable, she's only 18, that she hasn't actually deployed him. She just kept him in the seat of power and doing nothing. And he has this bloodlust that needs to be sated, and that's why he starts scheming against her. I like that we're seeing the element of trust and betrayal being, you know, executed now between Jude and Maddox, because Maddox says, you don't believe that I could care about you even after you betrayed me, because to Jude she thinks that they're going to be cut off now, that she's on her own, that she's no longer a part of Maddox's life because she betrayed him. He can't love her anymore. But we're seeing that that's not the case not only here but in other places. Like Cardan was betrayed by Jude, but yet he begrudgingly still loves Jude. Jude was betrayed by Taryn, but Jude still loves Taryn. Just like with Balkan when she went to go talk with him, Maddox is undermining Jude in her intelligence and what her true desires are, assuming it has to do with love and a crush because, you know, she's a young girl. That, you know, is this really what you wanted? Him. No, what she wanted was power, and she got it. Kind of. The state that the High King's room is in is interesting because he had not passed away that long ago. Not long enough to, you know, justify the level of dust and decay, and literally there were books being eaten by insects. However, I think it's supposed to parallel the state he was in and also his kingdom, because we know earlier in this book that the kings are linked to the land. He was old, he was decaying, and because of that, so was his land, and there are insects infesting his land. There are people trying to take little bits of his power away, slowly and surely, and this is what Jude and Cardan inherited. Even though Cardan is younger and more vital, the land already is, you know, reflecting that the colors are brighter, the land is more lush, the power is a little bit stronger than what it was before. However, the bugs are still infesting it. There's still some coming for more, and they can't ignore it anymore. Like, they ignored the High King's room, and it only got worse. Jude and Cardan cannot continue to ignore what they need to do with their power. More specifically, Cardan can't keep ignoring. Again, going back to my nature versus nurture argument, we once again see nurture being a part of Cardan's upbringing. In his nature, he actually is a good person. It's just that he was nurtured to be cruel. He learned it from Balkan. He also learned it from his mother, as we're seeing with this orb that Jude is looking in, a younger version of Cardan being shoved away by his mother and immediately turning around and beating the crap out of another little boy and then getting praise and laughter from his mother for it. The Bond telling Jude her life story is interesting because, like Jude, the Bond's family and like people were unalived during the Intercourt War. You know, she became a thief and a con went wrong. She got punished by the Court of Teeth, but was rescued by Dane. He gave them a new opportunity, and that opportunity led to them working now for the High King himself. And now she's lying on his bed. She never imagined herself getting to a place like this, and she is content. Whereas Jude's parents were unalived, as we know, and Dane also gave her a chance. However, this is not enough. She wants more still, but yet simultaneously she also has not suffered as much as the bomb has. Remember in the first book, after, you know, Cardan's family was unalived, she hated the way that he was reacting because she was seeing him with emotions. She didn't like that because it kind of ruined her vision of him as the villain. And we're seeing kind of that again, because when the bomb asked her, like, should we let the king in these rooms, Jude thinks of the horned woman who must have been his mother, shoving him away from her. I think of his father, the High King, who didn't bother to intervene, didn't even bother to make sure he was clothed or his face wiped. I think of how Cardan avoided these rooms. I sigh. I wish I could think of a place who'd be safer. She's finally, like, realizing, like, he hasn't had a great past, and finally starting to think, like, understand, like, why he might be avoiding these rooms. Like, finally trying to get into his head and see him as, like, an actual person and not just this, like, 2D villain that she's facing up against. Once again, I'm going to bring up this line from the first book, that after she kissed Cardan, she had this line where she says, the thing is that once you kiss someone, the possibility of kissing again always hovers over you. And we see it again because when, like, she's at this banquet, she looks over at Cardan, makes eye contact, and she thinks, kiss me until I am sick of it. Like, Cardan saying that to her earlier. Like, she's thinking about this. No one is, like, you know, prompting this. Once again, Jude says, I see that Locke has seated himself beside Cardan, drawing the girl whose seat it was on his lap. She kicked up her hoofed feet and froze back her horned head in laughter. Again, another girl with horns. You know who else wears horns very often? Jude. Probably not nowadays because she's not really doing her hair, but normally she does. Who put that seat? Did he choose that girl in that seat, or did Locke? What's happening? The other interesting thing is that these two guys are being held up, like, next to each other, that they're being compared because they're, like, their love styles are kind of foils to one another, because Cardan doesn't openly show his love. He's more sarcastic. He withholds it, but when he loves with his entire being. However, he still doesn't show it, whereas Locke shows it. He overly does it. He's very flowery, as she says, but it's superficial. So earlier in this chapter, Jude thinks about the old High King and how weird it was to be in his room, and thinking about how he used to place his hand on her head and the overwhelming pride she felt at his acceptance. Her words, exactly. And then Narcia, now a little bit later in this chapter, is saying, do you know why you didn't tell anyone my secret? Perhaps you tell yourself that you enjoy having something over my head, but in truth, I think it's that you know no one would ever believe you. I belong in this world. You don't. And you know it. So once again, we're going back to her old desire from the last book of being accepted in this world, which she still has not achieved. She has power now, but she's still not accepted. And that is immediately followed up with her thinking of something Narcia previously said, which is someone you trust has already betrayed you. So basically, the two main conflicts of this story is, once again, the acceptance in this world, because she still has not achieved that since the last book, but also trust, because for her, she definitely keeps her guard up because she definitely assumes others are going to stab her in the back. So she doesn't let many in, you know, past her guard. However, the ones that she does let in, she is then blinded by that. And they are the ones that end up stabbing her in the back. Narcia saying that he cannot love you breaks my heart, because, like, in the novella, we see he did love Narcia. And he does kind of what he does with Jude, where he blindly kind of trusts her and is willing to go along. Like, literally, he followed her into the water until he started kind of drowning. And he realized that, yeah, this isn't gonna work. But he still loved her after the fact. It was Locke that swooped in. It was her that lost her love for him. And, like, I can't remember exactly what was her reasoning. I have to reread it. It's been a while. But, like, he does. He wants to love because he had no love in his life. He is searching to have it somewhere else and give it somewhere else. Okay, so towards the end of this chapter, we're seeing Narcia still talking to Jude at the banquet. They're presented with a new dish. It's a heart of a deer, cooked rare and stuffed toasted hazelnuts. Narcia picked up the meat and tears into it, blood running over her fingers. Now, in the previous book, usually bloody meat eating was done with Maddox around, and we know what Maddox's nature is like. The deceit, the backstabbing, the, like, scheming, and Narcia is doing the same. And if you could also argue that the heart of the deer could represent oak, because oak has deer hooves. I love what Tatterfell says to Juby. She says, so this is how you've been living, a worm in a butterfly's cocoon. And she's pretty much saying, you can put yourself in this fairy castle, in this butterfly cocoon, but that doesn't mean you'll be able to change into a butterfly or a fae. You will forever be a human/worm. Now, before Tatterfell said that, the chapter actually opens up with her picking up the High King's trousers from my couch, and Jude a little bit later says, I turn away so she can't see my embarrassment at how untidy I let things get, not to mention what it looks like I've been doing and with whom. Now, if it was any other young lady of this court, they would love if this rumor spread, even if it was a lie, because it would gain them some power in the court, but not with Jude. It actually takes away her power. It discredits her, like, agency and her intelligence, As we saw with Balkan and Maddox, they assume that she's just doing things because she's in love with Carden, and they're like saying it in a way that's discrediting her intelligence. That they kind of like assume that Carden and Jude are both kind of slight idiots, and that they just kind of stumbled upon like a successful coup, not realizing that Jude was actually the mastermind, and both of them are pretty intelligent. Now, Jude describing her relationship with Tatterfell is interesting because it's showing what love looks like in the world of fairy, at least how Jude interprets it. Because to her, she assumes that love is a very mortal thing because it's noble. You know, you're kind of giving something without expecting something in return, whereas in fairy, it's always a bargain, a deal. That's why Tatterfell is working in servitude for Maddox, because Maddox is something as though she's owing a debt and she's paying it off this way. And so Jude thinks she probably loves me in a way, but her loyalty is always going to be to Maddox. She doesn't love me in a noble human way. In the beginning of the book, we start with this like kind of like flashback to a moment that Maddox was trying to teach Taryn and Jude a lesson about how easy it is to, you know, steal something, to grab power, but the hard thing is to hold it. And what Jude got out of it is that she needs to kind of almost become an island, that she can only trust herself. And we're seeing that play out here. You know, she keeps Maddox and Taryn and Carden and the rest of the Court of Shadows at arm distance. She doesn't let servants into her room, and she'd rather sleep in filth because she doesn't trust anyone. When Jude asked Tatterfell how she got in the room, she thought she locked it. Taryn emerges and says, "Oh, I pretended to be you and got a key." Now, this is the first of many times that Taryn pretends to be Jude. Now, Jude only pretends to be Taryn at least one time. Now, this is just based off what we know from the 3 books. And the only time that Jude pretends to be Taryn is because Taryn begs her to be, and that's in the next book. But the thing is, it's interesting because it seems like even though Taryn has technically achieved what she wanted, she has her place in fairy, she's about to marry into it, she for some reason is jealous of Jude and pretends to be her, and is willing to do things to satisfy Maddox because she still hasn't gained Maddox's respect and love that Jude already has, even though Jude deceived him. I looked something up because I was like reading it and I was like, you know, this could be important. So she's talking about how Taryn brought some of her old jewelry, and one of it was a ruby ring that Maddox had given her on a blood moon revel. And I was like, let's look at blood moon. It symbolizes the death and or downfall of a king. And 1, Maddox is the one that gave it to her, but 2, I'm pretty sure that is the ring that Carden steals off of Jude. Jude immediately puts it on her finger. But it might also be the same ring that Carden proposes to her with. Actually, Jude perfectly sums up Taryn, and this is how I view Taryn too, because Jude says Taryn doesn't like conflict. Her manner of dealing with all the terror and confusion in her lives has to become immensely adaptable, like one of those lizards that changes color to match her surroundings. She's a person who knows what to wear and how to behave because she studies people carefully and mimics them. 1, this is a trauma response, you know, after having her parents unalive and being uprooted and thrown into this strange world. But 2, I've always thought between the last 2 books that Taryn has acted more Fae-like than Jude. Jude acts still nobly, which is more of a human trait because you're doing something about expecting something back. And you can assume that Taryn has been watching her classmates and watching the court and learned how they talk and how they act, and she has picked it up and used it for herself. But she also mirrors Arenia's style of existing in this world. They alter themselves to improve their chances of manipulating others to do what they want in hopes that they'll do what they want. Whereas Jude is more like Maddox, where they don't change, they're immovable. They will storm the wall with their entire being and personality. It's interesting that Jude says, I don't think she wants to help me, but the effort she puts into this, especially as her own marriage is imminent, seems extraordinary. Now, we learn a little bit later that she was doing all this, helping Jude out all here, so then she can be like, hey, can you do me a big favor and make sure Locke doesn't become the master of revels? Which is, once again, showing Taryn acting very fairy-like. Like, I'm going to give you something because you're going to give me something in return, because fairies act like the give and take kind of situation set up in their society. But it's also telling that already this isn't Taryn's, dream wedding. She already knows this. This is not her dream marriage. This is a means to an end. Locke is a way for her to stake her claim in this world, that they can't uproot her. At least she hopes not. We're seeing that Locke revels under chaos. He's an agent of chaos. Literally, Taryn says that he's already going around to the different circles of courts and finding the weaknesses, figuring out what squabbles he can inflame and how. Literally, he's looking at where is the potential fire that I just need to hold a match up to and ignite it. And I think he's doing it because he enjoys the chaos. He enjoys his stories. he doesn't, I think, realize the potential harm he's doing to the power in this court, that he is actually, you know, destroying the power and making Cardan weaker because of that. And I think he actually probably enjoys it, because once again, this world of fairy is like push and pull, this prodding till you topple someone over. He's not doing it to help another court or to help himself rise exactly to a place, like, I don't think he wants to be king, but he just enjoys watching everything burn around him. It's kind of sad hearing Terrence say that when I'm with him, I feel like the hero of a story, of my story. It's when he's not there that things don't feel right, because it's showing that while Locke is a means to an end to her, he also is giving something that she greatly desires, which is love and attention. Because, you know, due to her not wanting to rock the boat, she's kind of made herself into a background character. Like, you know, everyone's probably lumping her and Jude together. If they were to, you know, separate and look at one person, it would be probably like Jude, because she has a stronger personality. But with Locke, he's finally making her the main character. You know, that she's not an add-on to someone else's story, that she gets to have her own story. So in a previous video, I think it was the last one, I talked about how Taryn brought back some of Jude's jewelry, and she puts on a ring that Maddox had previously given her, a ruby ring that he gave her on a blood moon revel. And I was like, you know, let me just look up blood moon. It symbolizes the death or downfall of a king. Guess when Locke's debauchery is going to occur? On Hunter's moon. That is also another name for a blood moon. Sir. Jude's talking about how the court loves the tale of Cardan shooting his lover. They're bringing up other stories, saying the more horrible the story, the more it is cherished, because it's giving them an excuse to indulge in their worst desires too. But one of the tales is the time that he charged across class, interrupting it on horseback. Now, it's been a while since I read his novella, but I'm pretty sure he was drunk and depressed because Narcia just left him for Locke, and that's when he did that. I love when Jude says that I go to a chair and sit down without waiting for an invitation. I want to remind Cardan that over me, he has no authority. Jude overthinks every little action because she has very little power, so she needs to assert the little that she does have, but simultaneously, she assumes everyone else kind of does the same thing, so that's why she overanalyzes Cardan's every action. But I love that Cardan goes over and sprawls on a chair opposite of Jude, watching me with his black eyes as though I am the one to be wary of, which I think he probably is, because he's probably like, there's a reason that she's coming to me. There's always a reason that she wouldn't come to me unless there was a reason. But him sprawling is to give off an air of being like unbothered, because I think he's trying to lower like Jude's defenses to not, you know, see him as a threat. Because if he was sitting upright, then it would look like he's attentive, and then if he's attentive, that might mean that he actually cares and wants to keep his power, which then would put Jude on the defense, being like, well, would you want to keep your power? Now I have to fight against you, and he doesn't want that. But I think he's trying to like look kind of cool too, because I bet you internally he's like, ah, Jude's here. When Jude asked him about the revel, he's like, you should have kept Locke there for the details. It is to be another one of my performances. I shall caper while you scheme. And caper means like I shall skip and dance in a like lively, playful manner. So basically he's saying, point to where you need me, and I'll dance to whatever tune you need me to do to distract, so then you can scheme in the background. Like, he knows what his role is in this situation, in this relationship. I love that Cardan's finally saying what's been bugging him for quite a while, and it's him saying, you will have to order me to abdicate in favor of him, or make an arrangement that requires us to trust each other, rather than my trusting you without hope of being trusted in return. At the end of the first book, he was burned because he thought that they were in this together, but she broke his trust. And all he's been doing since then is trying to get her to trust him, because he still trusts her for some reason. And he just wants them to be on the same level, to be partners in this. Once again, we're seeing that Jude doesn't trust anything that comes out of Cardan's mouth, because he says, perhaps then you could be my seneschal in earnest. He's being earnest. He's like, I would keep you as my seneschal. And she's like, duh, he's obviously teasing me. So Jude tells Cardan to look out for her sister, and he says, Taryn seemed well tonight, roses in her cheeks and merriment on her lips. Let's be sure she stays that way. His brow rises. Would you like me to seduce her away from Locke? I could certainly try. I promise nothing in the way of results, but you might find amusement in the attempt. Well, I love it, but there's something about what he says that I know there's something there, and I just can't pinpoint it, besides maybe trying to make her jealous. But like, there's something there, and I've been looking at it for like 10 minutes now.